Chapter 10, St. Helena, the 17th. Early in the morning, the admiral came to his house occupied the emperor. He had his 2 horses landed and brought one with him for the emperor's use. 2 other horses were also before the door, one for the grand marshal, one for me. The emperor was ready. Before mounting his horse, he ordered me to try it so that I might know whether he could use it without danger. After circling about a little, I dismounted, assuring him that the horse was easy and gentle. He mounted and, accompanied by the Grand Marshal and Sir George Cockburn, who acted as guide, took the road which leads along with the spot chosen by the Admiral to be the prison of the illustrious captive of the Holy Alliance. I followed a few steps behind. Immediately on leaving the town, we went steadily up until we reached the spot where the road is on level ground. The road was not very good, though narrow, but on either hand I saw very deep ravines, for the most part without vegetation. When we got to the top and went almost straight ahead, we had on our left for a good while a large hollow which is known as the Devil's Punch Bowl. This name paints perfectly the abyss which we had before our eyes, the depths of which are contorted in an extraordinary manner. They are a multitude of ravines which run into one another and unite in a few which are deeper and still more frightful. These last unite again and form a single one, which the former cannot compare. Imagine a narrow and winding gorge with high rocks, black and straight up and down, as though they had been hewn by repeated bolts of lightning. Nothing is more hideous than this last ravine, which runs in this way down to the sea. We reached a house called Hut's Gate. The ground back of the house is an amphitheater, and is, so to speak, the place where the punch bowl starts. This valley is covered with verdure, and contrasts singularly with what we have just described, which has so wild a look because of its black color. Before us was a road which had a mountain on the right which overhangs it, and which rises in form one of the arêtes or roots of the high conical mountain called Diana Peak. This latter is absolutely covered with verdure in all parts. Clouds almost always rest on its top. On the left is a valley which runs from west to east. It is covered with verdure for the most part, but let us come back to Hut's Gate. There on the left was the road which was to lead us to Longwood. It followed the curve of the punch bowl and ran on a level. At our right, we arrived at 2 little houses which served as an entrance to a large enclosure. We left the road which turned to the left as it ran along the bowl, and we passed between the 2 houses which were like guard houses, and we went straight forward towards a dwelling which was at the end of the road. We had seen this dwelling as soon as we had reached the place where the road begins to run along the punch bowl. On the right, here and there, were trees which seemed stunted because of their short trunks and their dry and thin foliage. This vegetation is effective from a distance, but near it is ugly and arid. It was noticeable that all the trunks of these trees were inclined a little towards the south. We approached the dwelling by degrees. It seemed to us fairly extensive. Everything was clean about it, and the different plantations as well as the lawns made an agreeable picture for the eye, but nevertheless one felt the aridity of the neighborhood. The shade which the trees threw was not thick enough to protect one from the burning sun of the tropics. The master and mistress of the house received the emperor as he got off his horse. They walked about the gardens, after which they went into a room where breakfast was served in the English fashion. They sat down at table with a lady who was a person of from 30 to 36 years old, tall, blonde, speaking French excellently. She had been brought up in Paris, did the honors of the house very well and gracefully. During the whole of breakfast, the emperor took great pleasure in talking to her. When breakfast was finished, they took a few more turns about the garden. The emperor took leave of Mr. and Mrs. Skelton, the master and mistress of the house, the husband being lieutenant governor of the island, and mounted his horse. The 2 persons who accompanied him, and we went back by the same road. We had gone at a walk. We returned at a walk. As I was somewhat behind, I could hear them talking, but I could not catch enough words to make out the subject of the conversation, which was probably turn out what they saw on the way. When we reached the descent, I could see the different sights much better, as they followed one another and changed their appearance from the different directions which were taken by the road, which was often winding. When we reached the curve which goes down into the valley, which opens upon the town, the emperor saw a group of small buildings, behind which was a little waterfall. When we reached the road which led to them, he took it. The principal building was occupied by the Balcombe family, whose acquaintance he made. The spot pleased him, and he asked to live in an isolated building, which was on the right, 30 or 40 yards from the principal building. As the admiral made no objection, the emperor took possession of this retreat, which consisted of only a single room with a little square at the rear, in which was a stairway, at the top of which was a loft transformed into a little room. Orders were given for the emperor's bed to be brought, and the few articles of furniture which he used on his campaigns. The emperor told Monsieur de las Casas and Marchand to come and join him. In less than 2 hours, the baggage was transported to the Briars, and Marchand, who had come with the things, went to work with me to arrange the room in the presence of the emperor. Monsieur de las Casas arrived soon afterwards. The count was lodged in the little room, or loft, which was above the emperor. Dinner was brought from the town where the service de bouche had been established. After dinner, the emperor walked about the neighborhood of the Balcombe house, and in the evening, when he was tired and it grew late, he went to bed. Monsieur de las Casas went to his loft, and Marchand and I stretched out on the thin mattresses which they had brought us, and which were the same, I think, which we had on board the Northumberland. During the early part of our stay at the Briars, Novaraz and I were obliged to go and find wood to feed the emperor's fire. We had to pick up dry wood to knock down that which was in the trees, and even to cut down these same trees, and to carry our supply to the house, and amuse ourselves in making it the king. In the service of the emperor's private apartments, it was useless to be particular about what one did. It was a good deal like camp life. Later, the government furnished what wood we needed, and we had a Chinaman to do the heavy work. It was the emperor's habit not to want anyone in his apartments, especially the 2 little rooms, except his valets de chambre, and nothing was done except by their hands. After the emperor moved up to Longwood, he was very curious to see everything which went on about his house, and it was for that purpose that he had a hole cut in one of the slats in the shutter of the first window, and on the west side of the room, called the reception room, so that he could apply the object glass of his telescope to it. He could already see everyone who came by the guardhouse very well. This was the way that Sir Hudson Lowe and Sir Thomas Reed usually came, as well as other members of the governor's suite visitors. A similar hole was made in the shutter of one of the 2 little windows on the right and left of the veranda or trellised French porch, which enabled him to have a view over the whole camp, which was on the north. He had also one made in the shutter of the first window, looking out on the east lawn and the wood. On this side, he could see the arrival of the ships which put into St. Helena.